Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is Explanation of Battle Through the Heavens episode number 208 based on novel. So let's start. Yarrow Tien's body stiffened as he stood in the sky. His eyes were filled with disbelief. At this moment, there was an extremely glaring blood-red handprint on his face. Traces of blood slowly flowed out of the corner of his mouth. The entire sky became completely silent at this moment. Many pairs of eyes had watched what had just occurred with great shock. Their eyes shifted towards Xiao Yang in the distance, whose lips had lifted into a smile. A chill surged within their hearts. The ancient clans were most concerned about their pride, yet Xiao Yang had ruthlessly slapped Yarrow Tien in front of so many people. This humiliation was a greater insult than just simply killing him. You dare strike me." The silence continued for a moment before Yarrow Tien finally recovered from his shock. His eyes quickly turned bright red. He glared at the spiritual avatar in front of him with crazy and savage-eyed. An earth-like brown flame suddenly surged out of his body, after which, it formed a huge turtle-like object amid an earth-shaking roar. This giant turtle was covered in sharp fire thorns. Its ferocious mouth was also covered with sharp blade-like teeth. Turtle Spiritual Earth Flame, ranked 13th on the Heavenly Flame ranking. It is unexpected that such a heavenly flame is actually in your hands. The face of Xiao Yang's spiritual avatar revealed a surprised expression as he watched the enormous fire turtle form above Yarrow Tien's head. This Yarrow clan did indeed possess some heavenly flames. Go and die. Yarrow Tien's face became more ferocious after the fire spirit was formed. A furious roar sounded. That enormous fire spirit moved its limbs. That giant tail, which was covered with fire thorns, unceremoniously swung towards Xiao Yang's head. That sound of rushing wind immediately started to whistle. A small trick. Xiao Yang's spiritual avatar coldly laughed upon seeing attack. His body swayed and a 10,000-foot-large fire dragon formed in the sky. The dragon tail was randomly swung and struck the fire spirit, causing the flame on the turtle's body to dim. The turtle immediately emitted a cry and flew back before smashing into Yarrow Tien's body. Yarrow Tien's face paled after the fire spirit was defeated. He spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. The turtle spiritual earth flame was merely ranked 13th. On the other hand, Xiao Yang's heavenly flame could fight against a heavenly flame ranked in the top 6 after having merged 5 types of heavenly flames. Additionally, Xiao Yang's spiritual strength far surpassed Yarrow Tien. It was an extremely easy matter to defeat the other party. Bastard. The fight between Xiao Yang and Yarrow Tien merely lasted for a split second. By the time Yarrow Wangue recovered, he could only watch as Yarrow Tien suffered a serious injury. His expression quickly changed as he let out a furious roar. With a swoosh sound, his body appeared in front of that spiritual avatar. His large hand was violently extended and the space in front of him collapsed. Xiao Yang did not intend to clash head-on with Yarrow Wangue. His spiritual body burst apart. It separated into waves of spiritual strength that eventually returned to Xiao Yang's body. Xiao Yang, you are seeking death. Yarrow Wangue suddenly lifted his head after his strike missed. His eyes were dense as he glared at Xiao Yang in the distance. Murderous intent surged within his heart. His body moved, and he appeared in front of Xiao Yang. A punch was thrown at the same time. Old ghost, you are really full of nonsense. Do you really think that you are the biggest here? Zi Yang, who was beside Xiao Yang, looked a little down after seeing Yarrow Wangue attack again. She took a step forward and blocked Xiao Yang. Her hand was clenched as it was swung forward. A large bright golden dragon roared and rose from her palm. It heavily collided with Yarrow Wangue. Bang! The clash between 2 elite 4-star Do Shungs was extremely terrifying. The space where the 2 fists collided collapsed. Everything within a 1,000-foot radius turned dark black. A powerful ripple swept apart as Yarrow Wangue's body flew back. His feet staggered over a dozen steps back in the sky before he managed to stabilize his body. His eyes stared at Zi Yang as he spoke with a gloomy expression. Ancient Void Dragon? Zi Yang took 2 to 3 steps back before stabilizing herself. In terms of a head-on clash, she had never been afraid of anyone who was the same level as her. The body of an ancient void dragon was incomparably strong along with her powerful dragon phoenix constitution. Although her level was the same as Yarrow Wangue, it was not completely impossible for Zi Yang to finish him off. An old fellow who is going overboard. Zi Yang randomly patted her hands and coldly laughed. You. Yarrow Wangue became furious upon hearing her statement. His face turned green in the process. He was about to furiously yell when Yarrow Ling, who had been quiet, suddenly pulled him back and shook her head. Elder Wangue, this is merely a temperamental clash between young people. Given your status, you have lowered yourself by intervening. Zuna also slightly smiled at this moment as she suddenly said. I think that everyone should take a step back. Your aim is likely not to come here specifically to fight with another. Why do you wish to waste your energy for no reason? Why? Does the Jiyu clan also intend to help this person? Yarrow Wangui coldly demanded. His face twitched after hearing Zun speak up for Xiao Yang. Yarrow Wangui, my clan's young miss is only stating facts. You should not try to be overly annoying. The blue-robed old man behind Zuna frowned and spoke in a faint voice. Yarrow Wangui could only swing his sleeves in anger after noticing who had spoken. He was naturally acquainted with Jiyu Nanhai, who was stronger than him. If they choose to help Xiao Yang with Zi Yang, their three-man team would likely suffer a great loss. Hence, he could only angrily let out a cold snort. He shifted his eyes to Xiao Yang and Yarrow Laro before laughing in a cold voice. The both of you should not be happy. Although my Yarrow clan does things with a low profile, you will not end up in a good state if you attempt to jump over our head. Xiao Yang smiled but remained non-committal. Yarrow Wangui, it is a tragedy that someone like you is an authority within the Yarrow clan. I will naturally visit the Yarrow clan in the future. I do not feel any attachment to the Yarrow clan, but I will carve the names of my parents into the clan tablet. Yarrow Laro's eyes glared at Yarrow Wangui as he slowly stated. The clan's tablet will not leave any have any mediocre names. Forget about your parents. Even you do not have the qualification to carve your name on it. You should give up on this intention as soon as possible. Yarrow Wangui merely mocked Yarrow Laro after hearing those words. Old bastard, do you really think that I cannot finish you off today? Xiao Yang's expression was dark and gloomy. His voice contained a killing intent which chilled one's heart. He viewed Yarrow Laro like a father. One of the things he could not accept in his heart was other people humiliating Yarrow Laro, yet this Yarrow Wangui's mouth was filled with dirty words for Yarrow Laro. The eyes of Zi Yang by the side flickered after having sensed the killing desire in Xiao Yang's heart. Both of her eyes stared at Yarrow Wangui. If Yarrow Wangui dared to utter any inappropriate word, she would immediately attack. You. Yarrow Wangui's face turned green after hearing Xiao Yang call him an old bastard. He was just about to angrily curse before he backed down because of Zi Yang's fierce eyes. Without realizing it, their three-man team had fallen into a disadvantage today. He might be able to hold Zi Yang back, but with Xiao Yang's frightening strength, it would likely not be too much of a problem for him to kill both Yarrow Tian and Yarrow Ling. The both of them were pillars of the Yarrow clan. He would definitely be punished after returning to the clan if anything happened to them. Yarrow Wangui could only swallow the curse in his mouth after having realized such a conundrum. His eyes were sinister as they swept over Xiao Yang and Yarrow Laro. Finally, he swung his sleeve and led both Yarrow Tian and Yarrow Ling far away. Everyone softly exhaled after watching Yarrow Wangui miserably withdraw. Their eyes were a little surprised as they looked at Xiao Yang's group. They had not expected an ancient clan like the Yarrow clan to suffer a loss in their hands. Yarrow Laro's body slowly relaxed the moment Yarrow Wangui and the other two members of the Yarrow clan withdrew. His expression also recovered. He gently patted Xiao Yang's shoulder and wanted to utter something, but he merely sighed in a pleased manner in the end. Back then, he had protected Xiao Yang under his wing and prevented him from being harmed. At this moment, this position had quietly changed. His heart felt a complicated feeling as he thought about this. Teacher, I will accompany you to the Yarrow clan once we subdue the purifying demonic lotus flame. Xiao Yang looked at the sighing Yarrow Laro and softly promised. He was worried that Yarrow Laro would head to the Yarrow clan alone. Yarrow Laro hesitated for a moment before he smiled and nodded. His smile was warm and pleased. This farce ended when Yarrow Wangui's group withdrew after suffering a setback. The strength that Xiao Yang's group had displayed caught the eyes of many experts and factions, especially Zi Yang. When the ancient Void Dragon tribe was powerful, it was not the least bit inferior to the Jiyu clan, Hun clan, or any other super factions. After the end of the farce, everyone once again placed their attention on the distant broken space. The cream-white light continued to pour out unceasingly like liquid. The desert below had turned into a creamy lava. Some bubbles occasionally rolled out from it as the bubbles charged out of many extremely hot airflows. Bang! This wait once again continued for around 3 hours or so. That broken space had also expanded from dozens of feet into hundreds of feet. It was vaguely possible to hear some strange sounds being emitted from within that space. The shattered space swelled before reaching a couple of 1,000 feet in size. It finally came to a gradual stop, and a cream-colored light circle vaguely formed in the shattered space. All the experts present suddenly opened their eyes the moment the light circle was formed. They could sense the temperature of this area raise by 100 times as much in an instant. Zuna also opened her eyes at this moment. Her pretty eyes looked at Xiao Yang as she softly said, "It is time to get moving." Her words seemed to possess a demonic strength. They had just been emitted from her mouth when the surrounding space immediately emitted the hurried sound of rushing wind. Numerous bodies with powerful auras rushed out of the distant sky with lightning-like speed. They collided with the cream-colored light circle with a whistle. Xiao Yang suddenly stood up upon seeing everyone head out. A great heat leaped within his black pupils. Purifying demonic lotus flame, I have finally waited until this day. Xiao Yang Jiji, you should ask anyone in this group of yours who does not possess the strength of a Ban Sheng to leave. Numbers are not important in trying to subdue the purifying demonic lotus flame. Zun turned her head and spoke to Xiao Yang after seeing many human figures rush into that shattered space like a swarm of locusts. Xiao Yang nodded. Although these elite individuals from the Alliance could be considered top-tier experts, many of them were covered in perspiration just outside of this realm. Some of them even had to unleash their Do Qi to resist the high temperature. If they were to recklessly charge into that space, less than 10 of them would make it out alive. All of you should head back to the Alliance first and guard it well. Yarrow Larrow turned around and cried out in a deep voice. Understood. Upon hearing this, many experts from the Alliance immediately sighed in relief, appearing as though they had been relieved of a great burden. They hurriedly replied before withdrawing in a quick and orderly formation. Although it was somewhat regretful that they wouldn't enter the realm and catch a glimpse of the demonic flame, it was better to be regretful than to lose one's life. With their strength, they were clearly aware of their chances of survival if they were to barge into the extremely dangerous space. Ha, brother Xiao Yang, we will enter first. Hua Xian faced Xiao Yang and cupped his hands together from a short distance away. After which, he moved with Elder Hua Yarrow, who was leading the group. Their group took the lead to hurry into that cream-white light cluster. Finally, they disappeared. We should also get moving. Xiao Yang clenched his hand and smiled in a somewhat anxious manner after seeing those experts from the ancient clans rush into the light circle. Xiao Yang Jiji, it is rumored that the purifying demonic lotus flame uses a person's emotion as a source to form the demonic flame within one's body. The moment the demonic flame appears in one's body, even one's soul will be incinerated into nothing. Hence, regardless of what you see after entering the space, you must try your best to remain calm without feeling any joy or sadness. You must try to control all emotions. Otherwise, these emotions will attract the demonic flame. Zun nodded and reminded everyone in a solemn voice. The expressions of Xiao Yang and Yarrow Larrow changed upon hearing this rumor. The purifying demonic lotus flame was far too mysterious. Even they, as alchemists, did not really know many details about it. It was unexpected that this purifying demonic lotus flame was able to use human emotions as a seed. Such a mysterious method was indeed worthy of its demonic flame reputation. Understood. Everyone should be careful. Let's get moving. Xiao Yang slowly exhaled and ceased uttering any other unnecessary words. He waved his sleeve and his body took the lead to charge forward. He turned into a ray of light that rushed into the light circle with lightning-like speed. Zun and the rest followed close behind him. Xiao Yang's skin suddenly became dry as he charged into the cluster of light. Passing through the light circle was an instantaneous task. After his eyes were momentarily dazzled by the light, he discovered that the surrounding space had changed. What a terrifying temperature! The first impression that the transformed space gave Xiao Yang was that it was like a furnace. His eyes swiftly swept around him, only to discover that he was currently in a mysterious space with a cream-white flames all around. Even someone like him, who had swallowed 5 types of heavenly flames, felt unusually hot in this place covered by cream-white flames. This heat was emitted by the cream-white flames. A thought passed through Xiao Yang's heart as the heavenly flame within his body slowly surged out of him before wrapping around his entire body. Only then did the heat that caused one's blood to boil significantly weaken. Is this the realm where the purifying demonic lotus flame is sealed? Where is Zun and the rest? Xiao Yang frowned as he looked at his empty surroundings. He should have entered this realm with Zun and the rest. Why was it that he was the only one in this place? Xiao Yang tightly knit his brow. His body was suspended in the air and did not dare to make even the slightest contact with the cream-white flames. These flames might not be the actual body of the purifying demonic lotus flame, but one should still not underestimate them. Moreover, this entire space was filled with mystery. This calmness hid a murderous intent, so it was always best to be a little careful. I should leave this place first. Xiao Yang's eyes swept around him. His toes pressed on empty space. Only then did his body shoot forward. This area made him somewhat uneasy, but first, he needed to find the others. Xiao Yang's body swiftly rushed through the sea of fire. The high temperature that saturated the space caused his skin to emit waves of piercing pain despite having the protection of his heavenly flame. Even the air in this realm was steaming. An indescribable desolation covered the entire land. Xiao Yang flew forward for nearly 10 minutes, but his expression gradually became ugly as he continued to fly. There was still no end to the sea of fire even after this 10-minute journey, and he had not come across any other human figures. It was as though this sea of fire was endless. Just how large is this realm? Could it be that we have been sent to a different area when we entered this space? However, I did not seem to feel any sign of being sent anywhere when I enter. Xiao Yang tightly knit his brows. His face was filled with his thoughts and an expression of loss. There is a voice in front. A soft voice was suddenly emitted from a short distance in front of Xiao Yang while he was thinking things over. He immediately felt a slight joy in his heart. His body moved as he hurried forward, but he had just traveled for some distance when he suddenly stopped. At this moment, there were 3 black figures standing in the air a short distance in front of him. Their eyes revealed sinister expressions that were filled with a ridicule while they looked at him. Chief of the Hall of Souls. The 3 black figures were the Hall of Souls trio from outside. It was unexpected that they would actually appear in this place. Moreover, from the looks of their appearances, it seemed that they had been waiting for Xiao Yang. "Why are all of you here?" Xiao Yang demanded in a deep voice as he stared at the 3 of them. The do qi within his body quietly began to circulate as he asked. "Nothing. We are here to let you have a look at something." The chief of the Hall of Souls slightly smiled. Waves of black fog suddenly surged out of his palm. The black fog churned before turning into a somewhat illusory figure. Xiao Yang felt as though he was struck by lightning as he looked at the figure. He muttered, "Father?" Xiao Zhan. The person who had been pulled out by the chief of the Hall of Souls was surprisingly Xiao Zhan. However, Xiao Zhan was only a spiritual body. "Yang-er?" Xiao Zhan's body trembled after hearing Xiao Yang's voice. He lifted his head, and his eyes looked at the skinny young man with disbelief. "Xiao Yang, there is only one fate for opposing our Hall of Souls. The destruction of your clan." An indifferent smile was lifted on the face of the chief of the Hall of Souls. His hand slowly landed on Xiao Zhan's head as he said in a faint voice, "Since we are about to capture you, there is no use for him to continue living." "Stop." Xiao Yang's eyes suddenly turned blood red after hearing the chief of the Hall of Souls' voice. The chief of the Hall of Souls coldly laughed when he heard Xiao Yang's roar. He clenched his hand and Xiao Zhan's soul was forcefully shattered. It turned into light particles that scattered apart before they vanished because of the terrifyingly high temperature. Xiao Yang was dull as he watched the light spots disappear. His body trembled. A terrifying murderous intent wildly swept out from deep within his heart. A strange smile was lifted on the face of the chief of the Hall of Souls after having sensed that wild murderous intent in Xiao Yang's heart. Both of Xiao Yang's eyes turned blood red. His breathing became as heavy as a bull while he stared intently at the chief of the Hall of Souls. He took a step forward. However, his body stilled immediately as his foot landed. Waves of cream-white flames suddenly erupted from a countless number of pores around his body. The terrifying flame started to wildly rage within his body. Demonic flame. The sudden intense pain emitted from within Xiao Yang's body caused him to regain his sense of reasoning. His heart was immediately startled as he hurriedly lifted his head, only to realize that the Hall of Souls trio had vanished. "This is bad. I have been tricked. Everything here is an illusion to stir one's emotion." This scene caused Xiao Yang to feel startled. He suddenly recovered and finally understood the strangeness of the whole situation. The demonic flame might be powerful, but no one is in control of it. "It isn't so easy to incinerate me." Xiao Yang clenched his teeth. His hand seal was rapidly changed as his new heavenly flame, which had been formed from the merger of the 5 types of heavenly flames, began to circulate. It wildly spread to every part of his body. The cream-white flames endured for a moment before beginning to be forced back in defeat an inch at a time because of the fierce retaliation from the heavenly flame within Xiao Yang's body. Finally, the flames were forced out of Xiao Yang's countless pores. Xiao Yang only sighed in relief after the cream-white flames were forced out of his body. He was covered in perspiration. It was fortunate that his resistance to fire was quite high and that his physical body was strong. Otherwise, this trick would have caused the meridians in his body to turn to dust. It is indeed worthy of being the demonic flame. The illusion it creates is not inferior to that of the Bodhisattva ancient tree. Xiao Yang rubbed his cold sweat away. A thought passed through his heart as the heavenly flame within his body quickly covered his eyes. After the flame surged up, the world in front of him immediately began to change. The cream-white sea of fire vanished. A cream-white fog that was around 100 feet in size replaced it. At this moment, there were dozens of people swiftly flying in the same spot within this fog. The bodies of some of these people had already been surrounded by a cream-white flames. Finally, they turned into ashes amid a miserable screech. Xiao Yang's eyes swiftly swept over this cream-white fog. After which, he understood that those illusions should be caused by this mysterious fog. "Teacher." After having swept his eyes around, Xiao Yang paused them on an elderly figure a short distance in front of him. This figure was Yarou Lao, but Yarou Lao's face was filled with pain. Vague cream-white fire seedlings had even surfaced on his body. Clearly, this was the prelude to being incinerated by the demonic flame. Xiao Yang's heart was filled with shock as he stared at the burning cream-white flames on Yarou Lao's body. He naturally understood just how difficult it was to expel the demonic flame that burned within one's body. If he didn't possess 5 types of heavenly flames, he would have ended up suffering serious injuries from the demonic flames earlier. Although Yarou Lao was an elite Do Sheng, he no longer had a heavenly flame guarding his body. He would be seriously injured if the demonic flames were allowed to invade his body. Xiao Yang's body reflexively moved while his heart was feeling shocked. He appeared beside Yarrow Larrow in a flash. After which, his palm suddenly pounded against Yarrow Larrow's back. A low cry was also suddenly emitted from his mouth. Xiao Yang had mixed a spiritual fluctuation within this cry. The sound wave that was mixed with this fluctuation was transmitted into Yarrow Larrow's ear. It violently collided with Yarrow Larrow's soul, causing his face to pale. His tightly shut eyes were also suddenly opened at this moment. Yarrow Larrow, who had opened his eyes, looked at Xiao Yang beside him. He continued to pant through his mouth. A moment later, he finally wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and said, "Thus purifying demonic lotus flame is terrifying. It is unexpected that it purposefully creates illusions to stir one's emotions to attract the flames that will burn oneself. If you had not warned me earlier, I'm afraid that my fate would have not been pleasant." Xiao Yang bitterly laughed. His eyes swept around him as he said, "The fog in this place is a little strange. Let's leave this area first. Where is Ancestor Huiyun and the rest?" Yarrow Larrow frowned and asked in a worried voice. The demonic flame realm was far too mysterious. It was fraught with fatal danger. Even an elite Do Sheng would face a continuous tribulations upon entering it. "I looked for them earlier. There are no signs of them in this area. Zun and the rest have also disappeared." Xiao Yang shook his head and voiced his thoughts. "They are most likely with Zun, Zi Yang, and the rest. That group is powerful, and it should not be difficult for them to escape the illusion." Yarrow Larrow nodded. Even if he wanted to save them, there was nothing he could do in this strange place. The only thing that he felt fortunate about was that he did not bring a large group in. Otherwise, all of them would have already perished. "Let's go." Xiao Yang waved his hand. His eyes glanced at those people still sinking into the illusion before they swiftly rushed out of the fog. He did not act out of goodness and rescue every single one of them. Most of the people here were after the purifying demonic lotus flame. They could be described as his competitors. Xiao Yang did not wish to see his kindness bring trouble for him in the future. Xiao Yang and Yarrow Larrow escaped from the illusion and did not remain in this area. After a couple of minutes of flying, they managed to charge out of the area surrounded by fog. Xiao Yang and Yarrow Larrow felt their bodies become a little lighter after they escaped the fog. They turned their heads and looked at the strange cream-white fog. Xiao Yang sighed in relief while feeling some lingering fear within his heart. "Xiao Yang ji." A joyous voice was emitted from a short distance away after the two of them hurried out of the fog. Xiao Yang lifted his head and saw a large platform suspended in the air a short distance in front of him. There was a large white door at the end of the platform. At this moment, Zun group was clustered on the platform. Their eyes were filled with joy as they looked at Xiao Yang and Yarrow Larrow, who had charged out of the fog. Xiao Yang slowly landed after seeing Zun, Zi Yang, and the others. He exchanged glances with Yarrow Larrow and a flame suddenly surged into his eyes, but the area in front of him did not change. "They are not an illusion." Xiao Yang only sighed in relief after seeing that nothing had changed. He smiled asked, "Are you all right?" "We're fine." Zun group swiftly hurried forward. She smiled and shook her head before exclaiming, "It is unexpected that the purifying demonic lotus flame is already able to release the nightmare heavenly fog. It looks like its strength has greatly improved over 1,000 years. Nightmare heavenly fog? Xiao Yang was startled. It is a fog that can cause a person to descend into an illusion forever. This was a unique ultimate skill of the purifying demonic lotus saint. It is rumored that the purifying demonic lotus saint once unleashed this skill and covered an entire city within it. The people in the city felt as though they had lived for a couple of centuries. Only after the fog scattered did they suddenly realize that the 100-year experience was merely a dream. Jiyu Nanhai faintly smiled before sighing. It is rumored that the purifying demonic lotus flame wasn't able to use this skill 1,000 years ago. It is unexpected that this time around, it seems like this trip is indeed filled with danger. Purifying demonic lotus saint, Xiao Yang recalled the light cluster after hearing this name. The light cluster should have been created by the purifying demonic lotus saint, but the thing that surprised Xiao Yang was that the light cluster, which reacted to the purifying demonic lotus flame, had become quiet after entering this realm. Where are the rest? Xiao Yang's eyes swept around everyone. He looked around, only to discover that there was no one other than them on this square. This realm is the world of the purifying demonic lotus flame. We have landed in its hands the moment we entered that crack. Where we will be delivered will depend on its intentions, Zuna explained. It has purposefully allowed us to come together. This realm is extremely mysterious. Earlier, I tested what I could do. If I forcefully attempted to break out of this area, even I would suffer a great backlash. This place is like an extremely tough prison. It is impossible to break it. Jiyu Nanhai shook his head. His eyes looked at the large tightly shut door and said, according to what the ancestors in the clan said, the same situation also occurred back then. If we walk through the large door, we will naturally be able to see the purifying demonic lotus flame. However, there will be many obstructions behind the large door. We must overcome them if we wish to arrive at the purifying demonic lotus flame. This place has been set up by the purifying demonic lotus flame. It will likely not be easy to forcefully charge through it. Xiao Yang frowned and remarked, "This is the territory of the purifying demonic lotus flame. Even we can only obey its rules before confined its actual body." Jiyu Nanhai faintly laughed. He was about to continue saying something when the surrounding space suddenly fluctuated. A terrifying temperature slowly appeared around them. "Be careful." Jiyu Nanhai frowned and cried out after sensing what was happening. Of course, his reminder was unnecessary. At this moment, everyone had already become cautious. Their eyes wearily looked at the many distortions in the space around them. The realm of the demonic flame was far too mysterious. They had to be as cautious as possible. Bang! The space around them became more distorted before numerous crack lines appeared. Wave after wave of cream-white flames swept over from the cracks. Soon after, many human figures with a cream-white flame around their bodies came surged out from the many cracks like floodwater. In the blink of an eye, the sky had filled with these fire human figures. These human figures were covered in a flame. All of them held a long fire spear in their hands. Their emotionless eyes stared at Xiao Yang's group. Xiao Yang's eyes were filled with shock as he stared back at the many fire human figures. He was surprised to discover that these people possessed real bodies and their auras were all quite powerful. Be careful, they are all fire slave, experts who have been refined by the purifying demonic lotus flame. They are another form of a puppet. Jiyu Nanhai spoke in a deep voice after seeing these fire human figures appear. Roar. The tens of thousands of fire human figures let out a violent roar after Jiyu Nanhai's words sounded. Their bodies moved in unison as they rushed toward Xiao Yang's group from all directions. Their momentum was truly earth-shaking. Xiao Yang frowned upon seeing this human tide rush forward with a ferocious momentum. He reached out with his hand and a terrifying force spread. 100 fire human figures exploded. Zun and the rest also unleashed attacks while Xiao Yang did. Everyone present was an elite Do Sheng. Their attacks were naturally extremely powerful. Those fire figures were turned into nothing a bunch at a time, but regardless of how ferocious Xiao Yang's group's attacks were, there was still an endless number of fire slaves surging out of those cracks. There was no end to this killing. It is pointless to continue this slaughter. We can only head inside. Jiyu Nanhai cried out in a deep voice. Xiao Yang frowned. He mused for a moment, nodded, and then said, "Let's go." Xiao Yang's toes pressed on the ground after his voice sounded. His body rushed forward. The fire slaves blocking his way exploded when they approached within 100 feet of him. The group began to easily charge through the fire human crowd. All of them threw their own palms that ruthlessly smashed onto the large door. Bang! The large door suddenly cracked apart from the combined attacks of so many experts. The endless fire slaves halted the moment the large door broke. They remained suspended in the sky, crowded together. Let's go. According to the ancestors of the clan, the demonic flame is located at the end of this demonic flame hall. Jiyu Nanhai cried out. Yarrow Laro's group immediately shifted their eyes to Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang slightly frowned. He glanced at the endless fire slaves behind him and then looked at the area behind the large door. After a momentary silence, he nodded and said, "Let's get going." Jiyu Nanhai also inclined his head after hearing Xiao Yang agree. His body moved, and he took the lead to head through the large door. Zun and the rest followed behind him. Xiao Yang knit his brows as he looked at the many figures rushing forward. Remaining here would mean facing the endless fire slave army. It seemed that it was only possible to escape this situation by continuing on. For some unknown reason, Xiao Yang's heart vaguely felt an unease. This demonic flame realm was far too mysterious. Cream-white flames filled one's eyes within this spacious hall. Many fire human figures stood straight-backed in this nearly 10,000-foot large square hall. They did not emit any sounds, but an extremely terrifying aura saturated the hall. That aura merged together and transformed into a large fire dragon that lingered over the heads of these fire human figures. There was a killing intent surging from it. Xiao Yang's group studied the formation in this hall from a corner. Xiao Yang's brows were involuntarily knit. This was not the first time he had seen such a situation. Ever since they had entered that large door, Xiao Yang's group had charged through 3 halls similar to this, but the further they progressed, the fire slaves they faced became stronger. Based on the senses of Xiao Yang's group, every single one of these fire slaves in front of them possessed a Dozun strength. One Dozun was not worth mentioning in the eyes of Xiao Yang's group, but when this number increased to 10,000, even an elite Do Sheng would have to brace their attention, especially when these fire slaves cooperated with each other perfectly. Their combined strength was extremely frightening. Elder Jiyu, when will we reach the end if we continue charging on like this? Xiao Yang frowned and involuntarily asked. Even though their group was quite strong, The do chi within their bodies would be exhausted sooner or later if they continued charging through these endless halls. The natural energy within this realm was mixed with the demon flame. No one dared to simply absorb it. Even an elite do sheng would not be able to endure if one's exhaustion was greater than one's intake. We have no other choice. The demonic flame realm has become an extremely dangerous place after being managed by the purifying demonic lotus flame for thousands of years. Otherwise, others would not have failed to capture it during these thousands of years. Jiyu Nanhai shook his head and replied. Xiao Yang's frown deepened upon hearing this reply, but he also felt helpless. This demonic flame realm was far too strange. After charging to the next place, the previous place would strangely disappear. It seemed as though there was a large invisible hand quietly removing the places behind them, forcing them to head forward. Did those ancestors from your clan also break through all these obstacles when they had come to this place in the past? Xiao Yang asked. Yes. Is the purifying demonic lotus flame stronger 1,000 years ago or is it stronger now? Xiao Yang's eyes flashed as he asked. Although the purifying demonic lotus flame 1,000 years ago was not captured by anyone, it still suffered a serious injury, but 1,000 years is more than enough time for it to fully recover. Moreover, from the looks of the nightmare heavenly fog, the current purifying demonic lotus flame is stronger. Jiyu Nanhai hesitated for a moment before responding. So it's like this. Xiao Yang lifted his head and looked at the dome above the large hall. His eyes slightly flickered. It seems like this purifying demonic lotus flame is planning to play with us like dolls. Everyone knit their brows after hearing these words. Being played with by a heavenly flame was really something that was difficult to accept. Let's continue to walk. Xiao Yang mused for a moment. After which, he gently waved his hand. His voice had regained its cool. Everyone was startled upon hearing this command. They quickly nodded as their bodies moved and attacked at the same time. The group easily crushed the fire slave army in the hall in an instant. After which, all of them turned into light figures that appeared at the end of the hall in a couple of flashes. After which, they destroyed another large door and entered it. They continued this bitter attempt to overcome the obstacles during this subsequent period of time, but the tasks were extremely monotonous. Each large hall had the same fire slaves. The only difference was that the strength of the fire slaves increased the further they ventured. In the last clash, even Ancestor Hua Yun had suffered some minor injuries while fighting the fire slave army. Although the rest were slightly better, their expressions had gradually become grave. Their continuous charges was little different than having clashed with many elite do shengs, causing them feel exhausted. Bang! The enormous door of the hall was shattered by the expressionless Xiao Yang with a palm strike. Another large hall appeared as the stone fragments shot out. Everyone felt a weariness in their hearts the moment they saw the large hall. They did not know how long it would take for these various obstacles to come to an end. Xiao Yang's eyes swept over the large hall. However, he quickly emitted a sound because he discovered that this large hall was not packed with fire slaves. Have we passed through all the obstacles? Zuna also discovered the change. No, Jiyu Nanhai shook his head. His eyes were locked on something in the middle of the large hall. There was a somewhat skinny figure standing at that spot. Strangely enough, no flame lingered around his body. Both of his eyes were tightly shut as a mountain-like aura spread from his body. 4-star Do Shang. Jiyu Nanhai's and Zi Yang's bodies gently trembled at this moment. A grave expression slowly surged onto their faces. Although the two of them were also 4-star Do Shangs, that skinny figure in the hall was still a little stronger than them. Is this also a fire slave? Xiao Yang asked in disbelief. Just how terrifying was this purifying demonic lotus flame? It was able to turn a 4-star Do Sheng into a fire slave? He can barely be considered a fire slave since he possesses an intelligence that belongs to him. Compared to those fire slaves that are controlled by the purifying demonic lotus flame, he possesses his own autonomy. Jiyu Nanhai spoke with a grave expression. Looks like this is the final hurdle. We should be able to reach the location of the purifying demonic lotus flame once we pass through this. This won't be easy. Xiao Yang frowned as he remarked. Even with their lineup, it would not be easy to defeat a 4-star Do Sheng. There is no way to retreat now that we have come here. Zi Yang spread her hands as she spoke to Xiao Yang. After which, her pretty eyes looked to Jiyu Nanhai as she spoke in a somewhat lazy tone. The two of us should attack together and finish him off as soon as possible. I am completely irritated. Jiyu Nanhai did not reject her suggestion. He understood that it would be difficult for him alone to deal with this skinny man. Pay attention to the surroundings. Xiao Yang gently waved his hand as everyone quietly rushed into the hall. They separated and surrounded the skinny human figure. Zi Yang and Jiyu Nanhai landed in front of that man. That human figure's tightly shut eyes slowly opened when everyone landed within the large hall. A pair of dark black eyes that were void of emotion were revealed, but they clearly contained an additional liveliness compared to the fire slave they had met earlier. Nevertheless, those eyes were still icy cold. Both of his eyes merely stared at Zi Yang and Jiyu Nanhai in front of him. Neither party spoke, but the atmosphere had become more tense. Xiao Yang only managed to get a good look at this skinny human figure after approaching him. The skinny figure was wearing ordinary clothes, and his face seemed to be completely stiff. There was no discernible expression on his face. Both of his eyes were cold and indifferent, appearing like ice that had not melted in 10,000 years. Bang! The ground of the quiet hall suddenly trembled as the skinny figure gently clenched the empty space in front of him. A strange 10-foot large blood-red axe appeared out of nowhere. This skinny figure appeared a little comical beneath the outline of that giant axe. The people present could clearly sense the terrifying energy the skinny figure hid. This person is really powerful. Xiao Yang's expression was grave. He would never have imagined that such an expert could be controlled by the purifying demonic lotus flame. Jiyu Nanhai frowned as he looked at the giant blood-colored axe. It seemed as though he was thinking of something. Both parties did not say anything unnecessary after the blood-colored axe appeared. 3 pairs of eyes glanced at each other. Wild wind suddenly blew as 3 figures brutally collided together. The earth-shaking ripple that erupted caused Xiao Yang's group to hurriedly pull back. The 3 figures in the large hall flashed with dazzling speeds. Sparks continued to shoot out as the 3 figures flashed and appeared. The unusually strong hall began to crack an inch at a time. Many crack lines began to spread. Xiao Yang's group had already withdrawn by a great distance. They were in no position to interfere as the 3 elite Do Shungs exchanged blows. Just the remnant ripples caused them to feel awed. Even with Zi Yang and Jiyu Nanhai's combined attacks, that skinny figure holding the large blood axe did not give in. The large axe danced like the wind as a bloody scent spread across the hall. Although he was powerful, Zi Yang and Jiyu Nanhai were not ordinary people either. Yi's skinny figure gradually fell into a disadvantage as the fight continued. However, his occasional retaliation still caused Zi Yang and Jiyu Nanhai to appear a little miserable. If it was a one-on-one fight, these 2 individuals would be no match for this mysterious person. The 3 figures suddenly made contact in the middle of the large hall. A frightening sound swept apart like a huge wave. The figure with the blood axe staggered and flew backwards. His feet stomped against the ground of the large hall, forming over a dozen deep pits. Roar! That skinny figure's indifferent eyes suddenly revealed a crazy heat after being forced back. A low roar was emitted from his throat as a powerful light suddenly shot out of his brow. A symbol slowly appeared in front of everyone's eyes as the skinny person's aura suddenly soared. Xiao Yang's eyes immediately paused on this strange symbol. After which, he seemed to have been struck by lightning as his face became dull. This is Xiao Clan's clan tattoo? The symbol that appeared on the person with the blood axe was the unique clan tattoo of the Xiao clan. Why did this person possess the Xiao clan's clan tattoo? This video will end here.